Disclaimer. The contents of Studio 151 podcast do not represent the views and beliefs of the TU Media Lab or the University of Tulsa.
Welcome to the BallsTalkSports NFL podcast. Last week, we killed the Kansas City Chiefs by both picking them to win. Is your favorite team next? Stay tuned to find out. So, without further ado, Victor, are you ready to get kinky?
Listen, next week it's Thanksgiving football. We know how awesome that is, but we've got one more week to go. All right, so you never look towards the future. You always look forward towards the present. That's how you get hit in a trap game. This is not a Balls Talk Sports trap game. This episode is going to be just as electric because I'm ready to get kinky. Let's do it.
We're building momentum.
Absolutely.
It's not often we start things off with a Monday night game, but we've got some brother versus brother action as the 7-4 Ravens take on the 7-3 Chargers on the road. Baltimore favored by 3. The Chargers are in kind of a weird place right now, because I would trust them to beat maybe 20 of the teams in the NFL. I would feel really strong about that. But against a team that I believe is a true Super Bowl contender like the Ravens, I have some serious doubts. And I think that starts with the Chargers defense. They have been excellent if you're just looking at the box score this season, but I have some serious concerns about how they're going to be able to stop the Ravens' rushing attack in particular. Here's sort of an interesting stat. The Chargers are 4th in EPA per rush against rushes inside the tackles and 24th to the perimeter. Baltimore does both really well, and I think the Ravens are going to come out heavy. The Chargers like to defend the run from light boxes, and I think that could really give them trouble early in the game.
That's a good thing to observe there, because that's one thing I feel like the Ravens do better than every team in the NFL. When you look at it, run games, when you have a good run game, generally it's not one-dimensional, but you favor one or the other, inside or outside. They can do both extremely well. And when you look at the inside run, I have serious concerns on if Baltimore is going to be able to establish that against Los Angeles. Because you look at the interior, it's not great at the first glance. But what I really like about this interior, first of all, we got Poona Ford up there having a good year. We talked about that last week. But what I really like about this interior is the way that Diane Henley's been playing. He has... This is a very, very lofty thing to say about a linebacker. He looks like Fred Warner light out there. I mean, I feel like I haven't been able to say that. It's not necessarily how good he is, because he's been very good, but he's not close to how good Fred Warner is. Nobody is, right? But it's the way he plays. I mean, you look at the mixture of athleticism, the natural trigger. He just knows when to go and when to drop back. It just reminds me of Fred Warner out there. I really liked him coming to the draft, coming out of Washington State, and he has lived up to it for the Chargers. So if he's there, he affects the inside run, but he can also affect the outside run. He's been getting a lot more time. He's been getting a lot more trust recently. So if he can go out there and make some nice plays, like we saw Pittsburgh make against Baltimore last week, they utilized the linebackers heavily in trying to stop the run game, getting Derrick Henry down, because we know we're not going to be able to get him down consistently. So let's just try to get him down consistently on the second level. You know, if we can't get him on the first level, that's okay. He's going to get his. Let's make him so we limit the big runs. And they did that for the most part. If the Chargers can go out there, they can limit the big runs, maybe force Baltimore to pass a little bit more, like they struggled last week against a good defense. I don't know. I think there's room for the Chargers here to overcome what may be not the most talented defense of all time.
I like that you bring up Diane Henley, because it just feels like this year the Chargers are getting so many guys on defense, so many guys breaking out, establishing themselves. It feels like the entire defensive culture has shifted. You bring up Poona Ford. I can bring up Christian Fulton. I think his matchup with Zay Flowers is going to be really big in this one. Baltimore is their biggest test yet.
Oh, yeah.
We had the same conversation when we were talking about how they were going to look against the Bengals. Is the secondary still going to be locking guys up? For the first half, the answer was yes, and then the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins factor kind of came into play, and let's be real, they probably should have lost that game. It at the very least should have gone to overtime. The Bengals missed 2 field goals at the end. That would have made it a lot more competitive. Baltimore is even better than the Bengals offenses. They're multifaceted. We know that they can run, but they can pass as well. The Chargers have been excellent at taking away the passing game, particularly on short throws. They've been devastating. 4.7 yards per attempt allowed is the best mark in the league by a pretty good margin. The quarterbacks that they've gone up against over this stretch, Gardner Minshew, Bryce Young, Justin Fields, Kyler Murray, Spencer Rattler, Jameis Winston, and Will Levis. Not the cream of the crop as far as attacking the spaces in between zones and hitting the back step you're dropping, getting the ball out. Not the cream of the crop as far as that goes. Lamar Jackson is maybe not the quarterback we think of when we think of precise, quick passing, but we know he can do it. However, it's not just the quick game. Surprisingly, for a team that runs a whole lot of quarters coverage, one of the Chargers' biggest weaknesses has been the deep ball. They're 29th in EPA per play against it. If Zay Flowers can get some good deep reps in, we know Lamar can hit that throw. I think that you could just have too much stuff coming at you from what the Ravens' offense can do. They might get overwhelmed.
That's fair, and you know what? I think I've got a slight concern if this team's able to target Jassier Taylor back there in the Chargers secondary. He's a safety. It could get really bad if they can figure out how to isolate him, because he was a big reason that the Bengals were getting these chunks of yardage. But yeah, the Bengals, it looked really good for the first half. The Chargers defense did against the Bengals, but then third quarter, just another collapse. It looked bad. But then I feel like when it came down to it, when it was crunch time, they showed up again. They got the stops. It felt like, okay, this is a Joe Burrow drive to win the game. It's never been more clear. They went out there, they got the stops.
They made the Bengals kick.
They absolutely did. And then what happened after that is just the luck of the draw and a bad kicking week. You know what I mean? So I think the Chargers defense, at first glance, you look, they've played well, but against bad teams, bad offenses, how are they going to play against the Ravens? I'm worried about it. I think that secondary could be exposed, but I don't have any. I think if their edges are fully healthy, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, they can make the difference in this game, because you look at it, Lamar, how have teams beat the Ravens? They've beat them by pressuring Lamar. And it's not because Lamar is bad under pressure. It's just because these receivers, if they don't get open immediately, they have not been good in the...
Deontay Johnson is not a scramble drill guy.
No, they have not been good in the scramble drill. So whenever they've been pressured 40% or more in 3 games. Those 3 games were last week against the Steelers, where they lost. They lost to the Browns, and the barely win over the Bengals in week 5 or week 6, I believe. It was the first game they played, where they lost because McPherson missed a bad hold. So you can even say, so whenever the teams are able to get pressure on them, they don't play as well, because their receivers are not able to get out there and help Lamar, because Lamar's great in the scramble drill, but when you don't have guys around you who are great in the scramble drill, it's hard to make that work. And the Chargers, they're 7th in pressures last year. Last week, they had the most pressures of any team in the league. This pass rush is hot, and if they can get home to Lamar, I really worry about if this team is able to consistently make the scramble drill work against the Chargers defense that I feel like is built to force mistakes whenever things go out of structure.
I really think they're going to need to generate that pressure, because if you let Baltimore get into their bag as far as passing, the Chargers could be in big trouble. One matchup I'm really interested in is Mark Andrews versus Derwin James. Derwin James has been having a pretty solid season, but primarily as a run defender. We know how hard these second and third level defenders on the Chargers can hit. He's been a borderline liability in coverage. I would go that far with the tape that he's put down this season, and Mark Andrews just continues building momentum. If the Ravens can get guys separating early and then hit some of those play-action deep shots over top, I think that they could drop 30. But, I mean, we got to remember, like you said, what are the Ravens in their last 3 games, 1 and 2? There are opportunities for this offense to start slow despite their immense amounts of talent, and that's what the Chargers want to capitalize on defensively.
100%. And then, you look at the other side of the ball. Baltimore did a really good job of stopping a hot Pittsburgh offense last week. But you know what? Travis Jones, he's not going to be playing. Travis Jones and Roquan Smith, they're both questionable. We're not going to be sure if they're going to play. So, you know what? If you can't stop the Chargers' run defense, it becomes run offense. It becomes really hard to stop their offense as a whole. Because when that's working, Herbert is pretty much impossible to beat. And one matchup I'm looking at, this is really big, because if Ladd McConkey plays and if he's at full strength, he's most likely going to be going up against Brandon Stevens. Because I don't think they're going to put Brandon Stevens and Quentin Johnson, because they're going to be able to expose that size difference so well. He's going to be going up against Brandon Stevens. Brandon Stevens has been god-awful. Like, truly terrible. Pretty much any offensive momentum Pittsburgh got was George Pickens beating Brandon Stevens in coverage. It's awful. So Ladd McConkey, breakout game last week or so. We say we've been on the Ladd McConkey train all season. If he's there and he's 100%, he's cooking Brandon Stevens' coverage every time that he's on him, and the Chargers' run deep offense gets going, I think the Chargers could produce. I think that they could have a lot of downhill momentum against the Ravens' pass defense that has been bad most of the year, played well last week, with the exception of Brandon Stevens. I think the Chargers could be playing a lot more downhill offensively. The Ravens are still going to have to battle uphill offensively. Not saying the Ravens can't win in this situation. I just think it's going to be harder, and that's why I picked the upset. I picked the Chargers. Even though they're hurt, I think that those injuries for Baltimore's defense are going to be really hard for them to stop. I buy into the narrative of the Harbaugh versus Harbaugh. Jim's still salty over that Super Bowl. He's still salty over the Blackout Bowl. He wants this one. This is his first year back. This is a statement game for the Chargers because I think this is good. I think the run defense does enough to make it hard on Henry. I think Diane Henley's able to eliminate a big threat of Lamar Jackson running in the QB spy game. I think Chargers are able to just win an impressive game on Monday Night Football.
Was rookie 2023 Quentin Johnston the wide receiver equivalent of what we've seen from Brandon Stevens this year?
It's arguable. It's arguable.
I think that the shot plays that Los Angeles needs to unlock, I do think that that's their ticket to victory. The matchup I had to watch was actually Marlon Humphrey on Ladd McConkey in the slot, but like you touched on, they could switch that up, and that's one of the reasons I think McConkey's so important, not just for what he does on the field, but how he affects the matchups. Because I don't think that the Chargers are going to be able to establish a really good run game. It's been solid. J.K. Dobbins is a solid running back. This is a solid run-blocking interior offensive line, although they're better rushing to the outside, which the Ravens do a really effective job taking away. I don't know. To me, it just feels like the Chargers are going to be running straight into the Ravens' teeth. Ravens are first in yards after contact allowed per rush in the good way. That's why it's so important that Patrick Queen plays in this, or Roquan Smith. Yeah. That's why it's so important that Roquan Smith plays in this one, because they need to limit those yards after contact. My swing factor in this game is Nnamdi Madubuike. I think that if the Ravens can stop the run, it's going to allow them to tee off on the pass. Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater are going to be very effective at locking down Baltimore's rush to the perimeter. I mean, Odafe Owe and Kyle Van Noy have both been having great seasons. I think that those are bad matchups on Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. The pass rush is going to need to come from the interior. Nnamdi Madubuike is third among interior defensive linemen with pressure. Third among interior defensive linemen with pressures at 39. If he can wreck both phases and make life really hard on Justin Herbert, the Chargers' offense just isn't the same beast under pressure that it is when they have their script working, when they're kept clean. I think that's the Ravens' avenue to pull away.
Absolutely. If Madubuike can go out there, be a game wrecker, this could get really difficult for the Chargers, and it could get ugly. But I think he also needs to step up in the run game because, he's not a big run guy, right? He's smaller. He's a pass rush. He started off his career as a pass rush specialist, but because of how good he is, they've tried to have him in on every down. But if Travis Jones doesn't play, he's going to need to step up because Jones has been this anchor for this run defense. Same with Roquan Smith. They've both been a big part of this run game. So if they don't play, we're going to need to see big games from Madubuike and whoever they've got up next. Baltimore does it as the nose tackle. I can't remember who they have. I mean, it would probably be... Broderick Washington. I mean, I think he's big enough to play what they want, but they don't have much depth there.
Is that a combination of Broderick Jones and Darnell Washington?
Well, I mean, he's not that big, but we'll see. Maybe there's Brent Urban. Haven't heard that name in a while, but he's the next man up theoretically after Broderick Washington. So, and you're going to need a big game from Trent Simpson in the run game, who has been off and on. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to a lot of who plays: Roquan, Travis, and McConkey. If it's more favorable to the Ravens, they get Roquan and Travis to play. They look mostly healthy. And McConkey doesn't play, I'm going to favor the Ravens. McConkey plays and those guys don't play, I'm going to favor the Chargers. And this is going to be a fun one to watch, though. Herbert versus Jackson, both of them playing at their best, playing at the top. I've got the Chargers 23-21, but it's like a 51-49 kind of percentage. I could see an argument for both teams winning. You've made a valiant attempt to persuade me, and I'm tempted, but I'm going to stick with my Chargers pick.
We've got key injuries on both sides. We have a lot that we probably aren't going to know till game day on player statuses. Ultimately, I just have faith in the Ravens offense to get right. I have Baltimore 30-24.
Fun Monday Night Football is back.
100%. Next up, we'll head to the NFC West, where every team is apparently the same. It's the 6-4 Cardinals taking on the 5-5 Seahawks. Seattle favored. This is a line that's swapped back and forth. Vegas can't quite make up its mind. Victor, who has the advantage here?
I'm shocked Seattle's favored. I'm going to give a clear advantage to Arizona. Just come out and say it. I've got them winning 25-17 by about a touchdown, because I think this is a team that is just a step above everybody else in the NFC West. Maybe you can talk about the Niners when they're fully healthy, but last week this was not a good game. By the way, Seattle-San Francisco last week. I wonder who was it that said do not take that took the Seattle Seahawks to not only cover but win that game. I wonder who was it. Maybe you guys should go back and watch the predictions episode from last week. See,
That guy must have solid takes, whoever that was.
yeah, I mean, he must be part of a legendary podcast that will soon rise to absolute stardom. But
And that has never been wrong before.
no, I've never been wrong before, except for the times that I have been wrong. But those are rare and far between. Anyway, Seattle, I mean, they went out there and they had a good, they had a week.
They did their job.
They
got
won.
it done.
They won. Doesn't matter if it was good or not. They won against the Niners team that let them win. Niners gave them plenty of opportunities to win the football game, and credit to Seahawks. They did something they haven't done much of this year. They took the missed opportunities from San Francisco. They applied them to points on the other end of the field, and they won the game against a team who wanted them to win the game. And I feel like that's been a struggle for Seattle, just taking advantageous situations this season. And we were able to see them do it more often than not last week. I felt Geno Smith had a really good game, pieced up this defense real well. When it mattered most, he showed up, so that's good. But ultimately, I think Arizona's playing at a different level right now. I'm drinking the Cardinals Kool-Aid. I'm back on the honestly, I never left the train. Kyler Murray's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and it's not particularly close. I think Geno, you can have a fun argument about who's better there. I'm probably going to lean Kyler, though. But my biggest concern right here is Seattle's run defense. I just don't think it's going to be good enough. And we've talked about it a lot. How we think Arizona likes to win is run the football. Whenever they're able to run the football well, and they're able to get a lot of rushes. Whenever that pass-run ratio is relatively even, they're able to win football games. And Seattle's run defense not only has it not been very effective this season, it's been rather soft. Like, they've got a lot of smaller guys on that front seven. And what does Arizona love to do? They love to ground and pound. They love to run it up your teeth. These offensive linemen are big. They love to hit. James Conner, that man, there's not a man who loves to truck guys in the NFL more than James Conner, except maybe a couple of guys, but Conner's up there. This is a physical team, and I think that physicality is going to win the trench battle, and it's really hard to win football games when you lose the trench battle, especially when you got the way that Arizona's passing offense is functioning right now. I'm going to give Arizona the win because I think that they're just going to be able to control the game on the ground. I think they're going to be able to win the physical battle in the trenches, maybe even on both sides. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But give me Arizona 25-17.
I think the Seahawks are very much in it. I think that the ball is in Geno Smith's court because Arizona isn't going to get a lot of pressure. That has been the big hang-up with the Seahawks this year, has been Geno Smith just doesn't have any time to throw. He's a quarterback with a big arm who wants to push the ball downfield, and instead he's had to play a different role. He's had to be the check-down merchant. He's had to be running for his life. Abraham Lucas, Seahawks starting tackle, was back in the lineup for the first time last week. He was immediately their highest-graded lineman per PFF, and I think that's big news. However, my matchup to watch this game is Geno Smith versus the urge to chuck it downfield no matter what the coverage is. Because if Arizona's defense does one thing well, they don't have a lot of roster talent, they don't have a lot of strengths, they do take away the deep ball. They play top down. Teams haven't been able to get much over the top on them. And that's how Seattle wants to win. That's one of the strongest facets of the Seahawks offense. If Geno Smith can be patient, if he can work underneath, if he can say, okay, I've got pass protection now, but I'm still going to take the check down. I'm still going to pick on the zones like I know he knows how to do. It's going to be really hard for Arizona's defense to compete. But ultimately, I think Arizona's well coached on the defensive side. I think that there could be a few too many mistakes. This is kind of a mediocre stat. I acknowledge that, but I feel like I have to bring it up. In games with one or fewer turnover-worthy plays from Geno, Seahawks are 5-2. In games with 2+, they're 0-3. It needs to be mistake-free football, and I can't put faith in this iteration of the Seattle offense to do it. We see it sometimes, but it feels like we see it maybe 20% of the time. It's a numbers game, and I just like the Cardinals a little bit better.
That's fair. And you know what? I think that lack of pressure and that overall, not non-existence, but it's not been the most effective front seven in the world for Arizona this year. I think that plays against them, especially because I saw it too. If Geno can dink and dunk throughout this entire game, if he can get Jackson Smith and Jig with like 12 targets, it could be a long day for Arizona. But Arizona loves to drop back their guys and play conservative coverage. So if Geno wants to throw the ball downfield, it's going to be a tough day for him. But they love to do that. And how teams have punished them is the dink and dunk, but also a quality run game, which Seattle has not only shown no ability to do, but a refusal to consistently run the football.
They say fuck the run game.
No, I mean we can do this with just passing, and it is a massive whiplash from Pete Carroll's philosophy of let's not give the ball to Russell Wilson. Chris Carson's my guy. We're gonna run it down there, throw it 16 times a game with him. So they're not going to be able to take advantage of Arizona's lack of a good run defense. They're not going to be able to do that. And when Arizona doesn't necessarily fear the run, those guys in coverage are just going to have a little bit of an easier time, which is going to make it a lot harder for Geno to play mistake-free football. Like you said, he kind of has to. That's why I'm going to give the edge to Arizona, control the pace of the game. If they can not only control the pace of the game in offense, but control how Seattle plays on defense, then I just think I have a harder time seeing Seattle win this than Arizona. Seattle can win this. Geno can absolutely bring them to a victory here. I just think I'm going to give the edge to Arizona.
Another factor that I think works in the Cardinals' favor is the fact that they avoid man coverage like the plague.
Absolutely.
Seattle likes to isolate DK Metcalf, so some people got to be thinking, okay, who guards DK? Who's not a physical mismatch with DK Metcalf here? The thing is, it doesn't really matter. At least in my opinion, I think they're going to take away his vertical ability, and if the Seahawks are going to play a good game, it's going to be with JSN and Tyler Lockett underneath.
100%, because you got DK, you want to use him as a deep threat. They're going to be bracketing safeties to him. And Jonathan Gannon knows how to call a defense in order to just make sure that deep balls just don't get through because we've got too many guys there. So if you can get JSN working underneath and man coverage, maybe beat those linebackers a couple of times, make him uncomfortable, bring him up a little bit forward, then that makes him a little bit more uncomfortable on the back end. You can kind of just keep playing that keep away game with coverage. Seattle absolutely has a path. It's just going to require Geno to play one of his best games of the season, like he did last week. It's going to require a good scheme day from Ryan Grubb, and I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but it just seems unlikely.
Throughout the season, I've been critical of Seattle's play design. I don't think that they're maximizing their talent. The same cannot be said for what Arizona's doing offensively. They actually have one of the shallower groups of playmakers in the league where if you look at the roster construction, it's quite top-heavy. They certainly have guys. However, they know how to get them favorable matchups. They know how to make the most of what they have. My big ask for Arizona is, are they going to be able to crush the perimeter with James Conner? Because you talked about how soft this Seattle defense plays at times. I think the vast majority of that comes up the middle, between the tackles. Boye Mafe and Derek Hall, I think, have been doing a great job setting the edge, and that's reflected in the EPA per play stats. If they can establish that hard-nosed run game, it's going to be a really long day because you get into that favorable game script, you work in the play-action bootlegs, you start taking shot plays downfield. Seattle could be in serious trouble. My matchup to watch is just whoever Devin Witherspoon guards, because I think you've got two options, and I think it's pick your poison. You can stick him on Marvin Harrison and let Trey McBride eat, or you can stick him on Trey McBride, who plays most of his snaps in the slot, which is where Spoon is comfortable too, and you can risk deep shots to Marvin Harrison, which is going to be a little bit flukier, but that can kill you right then and there. We know how good Marvin Harrison Jr. can be. I think he's making more and more of those tough, contested sideline catches. Big ask.
Totally, and I actually want to look at a different matchup on the receiver corner spectrum, and that's Michael Wilson versus Reek Woolen. And I think I'm worried about that one for Seattle because Reek has. I like him deep as like an intermediate to deep coverage guy. It's really hard to go up against him because he's just so athletic. He's so good at playing the ball, not just because he's a big guy and he can jump high, but he knows how to use his body, man. But short, he's been getting kind of killed. Like, not necessarily, it's not been awful, it's not been a liability, but it's been noticeable, and Michael Wilson loves to dice guys up with complicated releases and slants and outs and zigs in front of the first down line, get yards after the catch. So if they also can implicate a dink and dunk along with a good run game, by the way, big reason why this run game's been better as of late is because of the emergence of Trey Benson alongside James Conner. You got James Conner for the inside, running at your teeth runs. He has never been that great as a perimeter runner. Trey Benson absolutely is. He's hitting those outside. It's been very impressive. But, Michael Wilson getting the dink and dunk game, you can control the game at the line of scrimmage. It could be a long day for Seattle fans. It could be a long day for Mike McDonald truthers. And it could be the signal of a new king in the NFC West.
It absolutely could be. Seattle's been so bad at taking away the intermediate part of the field this season. I think this could even be a sneaky Greg Dortch game. A matchup I'm just really looking forward to watching. I don't necessarily think it's going to be the most impactful. It's got to be Boye Mafe versus Paris Johnson Jr. Just two good, ascending young players. Pressure generation is what Seattle does best, and they're going to need to make Kyler Murray's process hard, because if things are easy, if Arizona can get into their offensive script, major trouble.
Yeah, that'll be a fun fight.
I've got Arizona 27-23. We've got our third rivalry game in a row with the 5-5 Niners hunting for a playoff spot, looking to take control of the NFC West. It's quickly getting away from them versus the 7-3 Packers. Green Bay favored by 2. Victor, I don't think the Packers are a good football team, and that starts with the defense. Week after week, I am disappointed by our defensive line. This could be a snow game, and I think that works in favor of the Niners. I just think they're going to run the ball. I think they're going to run it to the perimeter. I think they're going to run it up the gut with Jordan Mason. And I think that they're going to take control of this game early. Now, Brock Purdy is seriously questionable. If it turns into a shootout of sorts, San Fran could be in trouble. But I don't like our odds.
That's fair. I mean, you're on the nose there. Packers have struggled on the interior. They struggle in the defensive line, period, especially against the run game. So if San Francisco can get something going, I mean, it looked real good last week against Seattle, even though they don't have the best run defense, as we just discussed. If they can get something going in some tough conditions, it could be hard for Green Bay to overcome that initial deficit. But honestly, I don't know if it's impossible, because here's a stat that I found. We've struggled this season to kind of pinpoint, why is San Francisco losing these games? I mean, you look at every major stat, they're like top 10, top 15. They're consistently very good. And the problem has come not in overall stats, but we got to look at the splits to really see the problem. You look at specifically their defense, which I think there's been their major problem. Their offense has had some issues, but overall it's been relatively consistent. They're losing games defensively, and it's happening in the fourth quarter. The 49ers are top 7 in EPA per play allowed in all of the first 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, they dropped to 26th overall. They game plan really well. They've got a lot of talent, but when it comes down to it, in the crunch time, these guys stop playing good football. They lose whenever it comes down to you got to have it. San Francisco's defense almost never has it. That is an unprecedented drop-off. They just lose advantages on defense in the fourth quarter. Third quarter is not that much worse. It just happens in the fourth quarter. They can't do it. Games they should have complete control on, they just lose control. This also isn't helped by the fact that San Francisco's offense never can really put their foot on the gas. It's not nearly as bad as the defense. They just let people get in games that they shouldn't be, and games that are kind of tighter, they let them get they let the other team get a little bit of an advantage. So you contrast this with a Green Bay team that I feel like has gets better as the game goes on. In a tough environment, I don't think San Francisco is going to be able to hold out in the fourth quarter. You may even see the slide start in the third quarter, where this team just slowly starts to get gassed. They start to just not really understand how do we make this count when it's talent versus talent. How do we show up in the big moments? And the snow game is going to make it just that much harder for them. I really worry about the Niners, and this kind of thing, it spells doom for their hopes for the postseason this season, if they even make it. This is something that winning teams cannot do. They cannot drop off in the fourth quarter. You look at almost every team that's good ever, they almost always get better in the fourth. Niners have done the opposite, and I think that's their biggest issue. So I really struggle to pick a team that doesn't play well in the fourth quarter against a team that maybe they're not as good as the record says they are. I still think they're not a bad team by any measure. I think Love comes into his own in the fourth quarter more often than not. There will be some not, but more often than not, I think he'll play well in the fourth quarter. I think Green Bay wins at 21-17.
I definitely get it. I do. The Niners aren't the most physical team, not at this stage. They've got some young players in the secondary. They have some pretty clear liabilities like the Devondre Campbells of the world. However, the Packers' offense has this consistent lack of an ability to get a bucket when they need it. And it's tough for me to say that because we saw what this team did to the Vikings, where they went down early and then they came back, but it just feels like there's something you can't quite put your finger on. Maybe it's inconsistencies from Jordan Love. Maybe it's the fact that the run game is really dried up in Green Bay. Maybe it's the fact that you usually don't have an alpha wide receiver one. Christian Watson looked like that guy, over 100 yards, touchdown or so, made all 4 of his contested catch opportunities. He was excellent, and they need a big performance from him again because this is a Green Bay team that lives and dies via the deep ball. Number 1 in EPA per play on deep passes, and number 1 by about 15 yards in deep passing yardage per game. In the snow, that gets harder. I don't know whether or not this team can run downhill. I don't know whether or not Jordan Love is going to make costly mistakes. However, things are not all sunshine and rainbows for the 49ers offense either. If Rashawn Gary steps up again, the way he did against the Bears, because let's get this clear, Packers should have lost to the Bears, but they were not even in that situation if Rashawn Gary doesn't have a sack and a whole bag of pressures to his name. Trent Williams might not go in this one. The Niners offense, this is kind of what I identified as one of the reasons the Niners have really struggled. There is a stark contrast between their efficiency when they're running their script, when the pocket is clean, versus when they're under pressure. If this is the breakout game for Green Bay's defensive line against a really beat-up 49ers unit, that could be a potentially game-wrecking script. However, if the George Kittles of the world, the Deebo Samuels of the world, who's looking to finally get it going, Juwan Jennings has been playing really good football, if they can attack a bad linebacker room underneath, they could have their get-right game.
Yeah, and that's a big worry. That linebacker room, it's normally pretty bad, but Cooper's he might miss this game, and I feel like that's who you're going to put on Kittle if you want any chance at stopping him. So that's a worry. But ultimately, Purdy didn't practice today, and it looked like he might not even make the flight out to Green Bay. I always give a little bit of an edge to team in hard conditions to teams at home, and especially at Lambeau, and especially when you consider that this is San Francisco. It's not like they have a lot of experience playing in the snow. This isn't a team that goes up north much, except for this rivalry. And that does worry me. But again, you look at this, CMC looked better last week. If he can run the ball well, this is a tough game. It's almost a 50-50. I did go Green Bay eventually because maybe this is some wishful thinking, but I'm going to project a little bit of positive regression for this run game. Not just because of the conditions, though I think that does help. I've watched Josh Jacobs a lot as a Broncos fan, and I've watched him a lot in tougher conditions than normal. Whatever it is about this guy, the tougher the conditions are, the better he plays. Whenever it's snowing, whenever it's raining really hard, he lowers the shoulder, and he wants it more than you do whenever it's tough, because this guy's mentality is insane. Another big thing for the Packers is you're getting Evan Williams back. And he was really good when he was playing to start the season, and getting him back in that safety room is going to help a lot.
These are 2 high-variance teams. We've got a lot of injuries that are coming into play. It very well might just be the playoff trauma that causes me to make this decision, but ultimately I do have the Niners taking it 28-27, and I'm shaking a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a super weird game, but honestly, the aesthetics of a Packers versus 49ers snow game, that could heal the world right now.
It's going to be awesome no matter who wins.
Oh,
and no
yeah.
matter how ugly this game may be.
I feel like the uglier, the better.
Absolutely. The 8-2 Eagles are heating up. They take on the 5-5 Rams on the road. Philly favored by a field goal. I know we've both been skeptical of Philly at times. Do they keep it rolling against LA?
I think they do. You look at LA, they've got their guys back, but this still isn't the best team, especially on the defensive side. When you look at how they've been getting defensive stops, and when you look at where their wins have come defensively, it's been through pressure, especially that bad man, defensive rookie of the year favorite, Jared Verse. But you know what? You're going up against one of the best pass protecting offensive lines in football. Jordan Mailata's back. I think he played last week too, but he's been back for a couple games now, and it's so clear the difference that he has on this team. And Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata, I saw a stat the other day. It was like island pressure rates of offensive tackles. So whenever an offensive tackle is on an island, whenever they're one-on-one in pressures, they're putting Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson on islands 70% of the time. And those two are the two lowest pressure rates on islands in the entire league. Freaky stuff from these offensive tackles. So Rams want to get pressure. They want to win with Jared Verse on the outside, win with stunts on the inside. I don't think the Eagles are going to be fooled. I think Hurts is going to have all the time in the world to throw, and I think they'll get it done.
The Eagles' offense, with a fully healthy offensive line and a Jalen Hurts who's kept clean in the pocket, it's just an entirely different beast than the kind of disjointed unit we saw earlier on. The Rams are really vulnerable downfield. Cam Kinchens and Cam Curl, both of the Cam Ks, have been having really rough seasons.
Kinchens is getting better.
Kinchens is heading in the right direction. I would still say that he's been well below average at protecting against the deep ball. And even though Devontae Smith is out, when you have a guy like A.J. Brown, that is a tough assignment. However, I don't even know if they're going to need to lean into the deep ball, because there's a chance that Philly just comes out and they blow L.A. off the ball in the trenches. Braden Fisk is my swing factor in this game. He's gotten some nice production on loops and stunts, coming in unblocked. He's even had a nice few pass rush wins. However, he's been the guy that we thought he was as far as holding his ground in the trenches. He needs to step it up. That's not going to be easy, but they need to hold ground on the interior, because we saw what happens when they played the Commanders last week. When Philly can just lean on the inside rushing attack with Saquon Barkley, that spells disaster for just about any team in the NFL. And if Jalen Hurts doesn't have to think too much, if he can just hand it off and hit the easy stuff, it's going to be a nightmare day for LA.
Yeah, that's my worry. I believe in the Rams enough that this has actually been a relatively quality run defense, despite the Braden Fisk factor. I think Kobe Turner has been punching above his weight, literally. He's been going up against bigger guys. He's been taking a little bit more, especially when Braden Fisk's on the field. He's been asked to take a lot of bigger guys, and I think he's playing well. So this run defense isn't awful. It's not great. It's not going to win you. It's not going to win you a game, but if they can just muck up the run game enough so it's not just automatic. So Saquon can't just give Saquon the ball and feel confident they're going to get 5 yards, then you're going to have to make Hurts pass. And we haven't seen Hurts pass in this current iteration of the Eagles, which I feel like this iteration of the Eagles kind of started about the Bengals game, I think. We haven't seen Hurts really have to pass yet. So if they can force him to do that, then maybe we have a little bit of an issue, because we've talked about Hurts, when everything's going right, he's good. But again, pressure, he's just not going to get pressured much. And even if he's also just going to have his easy button, A.J. Brown, just toss up to A.J. Brown. Because, let's look at let's take a trip. Why don't we look at the Rams' outside corners? We've got Kobe Durant and Darius Williams. Kobe Durant is 5'11" and 183 pounds. Darius Williams is 5'9" and 182 pounds.
Both those guys are a lot bigger than I am. I don't know what you're on about.
Yeah, it depends. Do you think you can cover A.J. Brown? 6'3", 221?
Let me think.
That Badger in you. Maybe.
Oh, fuck no.
Yeah, I don't think I'm what? I'm 6'3", 250. I don't think I could cover A.J. Brown. I definitely couldn't cover A.J. Brown. He would moss me 2 ways from Sunday. So their biggest guy is Quentin Lake in the nickel, and I don't think they're going to want to move him out because of how effective he's been in the run game. We just talked about how important it is for them to stop the Philly run game. So you've got a 5'9" and 5'11" guy trying to cover the best. Honestly, I'm going to go, though, with the best physical receiver in football when it comes down to just pure jump balls and going up and getting it and using your physicality to the maximum efficiency, I think that's A.J. Brown. So Jalen Hurts, just press the A.J. Brown button. We'll get 1,000,000 yards. Devontae Smith isn't playing. Maybe that knocks my Philly score down by like 3 or 4 points, but even then, I'm still going to have them winning 26-18. So I think there's just too many ways for Philly to win offensively, and it's just going to be an uphill battle for the Rams to score against a Philly defense that has been just lights out recently. So I think it could be a fun game to watch. There's going to be some star power on both sides. I think we'll see some interesting stuff happen, but I don't think this is going to be too close of a game.
Even if Philly gets a worst-case scenario where the Rams do somehow come away with a lot of pressure, maybe Jared Verse takes yet another step up, I think that this offense is just too talented to not get theirs. And you touched on it. It's going to be tough for the Rams offense to put up consistent points, consistently string drives together. This Eagles secondary has been better than any of us could have expected. It feels like every single player they're running out there has overperformed. This is going to be a huge test of mettle for Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean.
Oh, yeah.
The Rams offense has not looked perfect. It's looked far from perfect, but Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are still those two dudes. Philly, on the other hand, #1 pass defense by EPA per play without pressure. When these guys are left on islands, they are dominant. It's going to be a ton of fun to see whether or not that continues. But here's the thing. The Rams offense drops off under pressure. That's why they've been a little disappointing over the past couple of weeks, even though they've put together a few wins against low-end competition. Philly is one of the league's most potent 4-man pass rushes. We really saw that come into play against Washington, where they didn't feel the need to blitz Jaden Daniels. They just contained him. They made him play for the pocket. And that's been a game script that hasn't gone very well for the Rams this year. Rob Havenstein still out. It's looking like Joe Noteboom's going to get the start. This feels like a game where the Rams don't do really anything better than the Eagles do. It's still a good team. It's still a talented roster. They're still at home. There's a chance, but I'm going to go Philly 31-21.
Yeah, Sunday Night Football factor. Maybe something happens, but no. I think this will be a really good game we've seen Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean get tested. I'm not saying that they're an unproven. They've gone up against the fires of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and they've won. They have played really good receivers, and they have consistently done it. But this is just another big one where I'm guessing that they're going to ask a lot of them in this one. Cooper DeJean versus Cooper Kupp. I think that's going to be the one I'm going to focus on because I think Quinyon Mitchell and Puka Nacua, each of them is going to get theirs. Because I believe in Quinyon, I think he's a little bit more consistent than DeJean. DeJean has been, but again, DeJean hasn't played for as long as he has. I think Quinyon's been playing since the start of the season. DeJean's only come on in this recent stretch. Cooper Kupp was by far the most efficient guy last week. He was moving the chains. He was scoring the points. So if DeJean can get a hold of him the way he's playing right now, and Quinyon can limit Puka's damage, man. I'm already there, but I'm just going to even more there with those two.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you had to choose for one game, no injury history factored in, are you taking Amon-Ra St. Brown or Cooper Kupp?
Current versions.
Yes.
I'm taking Amon-Ra.
Okay, that's fair. God is sun god, but Cooper Kupp is still triple crown Cooper Kupp.
I'm taking triple crown Cooper Kupp over Amon-Ra. It's really close, but I am because you look at there was one quote from the Super Bowl 2021 Rams versus Bengals when they threw a fade to Cooper Kupp for the touchdown, and Al Michaels was like, everyone in the free world knew who that ball was going to, and that summed up the Rams' entire season. You knew it was going to Cooper Kupp, and you couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. That was Cooper Kupp's season. That was Cooper Kupp, and he's still that guy, just a slightly worse version of that guy. I'm going to take Amon-Ra, but it's close, and that's a good question.
If Zach Taylor was calling that game, they would have thrown it to Demarcus Robinson.
If Zach Taylor was calling that, if you had switched the play callers in that game, I think that would have been one of the worst Super Bowls in recent memory. I think that borders on Buccaneers, Chiefs territory.
All right, time to get back on track. The Bears showed some life last week against Green Bay, just to have it ripped away at the last moment. But they'll get another crack at an NFC North rival when they take on the 8-2 Vikings. This one is at Soldier Field, Minnesota favored by 3.5. Victor, that was a different Caleb Williams last week. I saw him with my own two eyes. With Shane Waldron gone, Caleb Williams looked like the USC version again. Not perfect, but he looked comfortable. He looked loose. He was willing to make plays out of structure. He had a positive EPA under pressure. That has been the Caleb Williams killer, has been bad offensive line play and pressure. And he turned actually a pretty decent performance from the Green Bay defensive line into a net positive on his part. It also struck me Chicago is using motion. I didn't think we were going to see that, but we actually did see meaningful pre-snap changes, maybe making Caleb's job a little bit easier. But now he's got a tougher matchup. Now he's got Brian Flores, and that is my matchup to watch. I think we're seeing a different version of the Chicago Bears, and I have to factor that in, but this is still a team that is 26th in EPA against the blitz. We know what Flores can cook up. It's going to be a pretty healthy Chicago offensive line. I think that's a big deal. Man, I'm excited to see who wins this fight.
Yeah, this one, and you talked about the motion. This one's going to be good. You talked about the motion. I don't think I gave adequate credit to Thomas Brown. Man, he called the game last week. I really liked what I saw from him, and and the way he carried himself after the loss, he wasn't talking about we should have beat these guys because they should have. He was just like, we can do things better. There's something about the way he carried himself, the way he took ownership, the way that he was talking about Caleb, the way he was talking about this team. I was like, is that head coaching material right there? If this is the version of the Bears we see all season, I think a team would be insane not to give Thomas Brown a look, especially, he's accumulated a lot of experience. He's called some good offenses. He's a really, really smart guy. But that's beside the point. Let's talk about the actual game. Your matchup to watch, similar to my matchup to watch, actually, it's going to be Caleb Williams versus the schemed pressure that we're going to see. Because Caleb looked really good under pressure, but I don't think I think the pressure that the Packers bring and the pressure the Vikings bring are fundamentally different. I think the Packers kind of they tell their guys, just go out there and win on one-on-ones. We want you. I mean, I'm not saying that's all they do. I think they do that more. Let's just get the one-on-ones. We're trying to win with power. Right? We just want to run these rushes. We don't see as many stunts as we do in the Vikings defense.
They don't weaponize pressure in the same way. A fun fact about Green Bay's defense is they actually blitz less than anyone else in the NFL,
Yeah.
but they're first in generating pressure when they do blitz.
That is insane.
It's interesting, but I think it's because they're able to pick their spots and they can just have their guys win versus the Vikings. Even the numbers might not be quite as fantastic, but it's because they're sending so much pressure. So many sim blitzes. Naturally, you're going to take some losses against it, but it forces opposing offenses to game plan specifically for that one thing. The way they mix up coverages, this is a fascinating defense to watch.
Yeah, and when you look at how Caleb Williams has escaped pressure all year, but last week too, I think he did better last week. He's he takes what he sees at face value and he tries to run around it. And I'm just worried that if he tries to make a play and if he tries to get out of pressure in some fantastical play, a classic Caleb, he's going to meet Andrew Van Ginkel. He's going to meet Jonathan Grenard because they're going to be in wildly different spots than he expects them to be. I think Flores is going to bring Cashman on the blitz. I think he's going to bring Pace on the blitz a lot. I think Pace could be a game wrecker in this one if he's able, because it's hard to corral Caleb Williams. I have 100% faith that Ivan Pace can do that. So I worry that Caleb Williams is going to be running for his life back there, and I worry that when he's going to be running for his life, he's not necessarily going to be doing it in the most efficient way. Now, I think he'll be able to pass the ball downfield better. I think how Thomas Brown ran that offense was just a little bit more simpler. It's not necessarily simpler. Shane Waldron, just better. Shane Waldron was running a just awful system out there, and I think that last game proved it, but it's just a little bit easier for Caleb Williams to work through. And it's just easier for him to get a hang of it. So they're going to be able to do some decent things downfield. Obviously, Caleb's going to have to play well, and he's going to have to know what he's looking at, which is a hard thing to do against the Brian Flores defense. But if they can run the ball as well as they did last week against a Minnesota run defense that is a little bit worse than their pass defense, maybe we can get something going. Maybe there's a path. Maybe there's a path to getting this upset. There absolutely is a path to getting this upset, but maybe there is. And then, maybe you force a couple interceptions off Sam Darnold. Maybe you get the win you should have gotten last week.
I like that you bring up the run defense because I think even though this is a different, better version of the Bears offense, there's one facet that's going to remain the same, and it's going to be that they're asking Caleb Williams to go out there and win by himself. I don't think Chicago's going to have a run game here. Let me just list off the defenses that the Bears have played. This is incredibly lazy analysis. I 100% acknowledge that. But just think about this from a run defense perspective. The Titans. Okay, this is probably the best run D on the list. The Titans are underrated on the line. Titans, Texans, Colts, early season Colts, when they didn't have Buckner. Remember they were getting gashed?
Oh, yeah.
Rams, Panthers, Jaguars, Commanders, Cardinals, Patriots, and Packers. I think there's one top half run defense there, and I think it's the early season Titans. The Vikings' run defense might be a little worse than the pass, but that's just because the pass is so good. This has been an elite, light box run defense team. What they've been able to do out of odd, almost Okie-style fronts, it really impresses me. The way that they can consistently, it's the consistency that I love, that they can limit opposing run games. I don't think the Bears are going to be able to go out there and punch them in the face. I think it's still all on Caleb.
I agree. I did like what we saw from the run game last week. That's one thing that Thomas Brown did that I expected him to do. I mean, you look at what was happening before. I believe they were averaging about 26 carries a game, which is on the lower end. But then last week they ran the ball like 35 times. They did exactly what they should have. They just try to run the ball. Even if it's not working, just keep doing it, because eventually it's going to start working a little. That's what you hope, at least. And that takes a little bit of the pressure off Caleb Williams, because if they know you want to run the football, let Caleb Williams have a little bit, let's devote a little bit less attention to making Caleb Williams nervous and a little bit more attention to make sure that we can keep stopping this run defense. But overall, Minnesota's just so good at doing both. I don't see that they're going to have to devote as much resources to doing that, just because of the overall talent of this defense, the overall scheme, how it's built to stop Chicago. I just think that Chicago's offense is going to have a tough time getting through that shell. And that's why I've got Minnesota 20-17, because I think Chicago's defense will do their part. I just think they'll let just a little more through than Minnesota's defense will.
Speaking of quarterbacks under pressure, that is what Chicago needs to do to stay in this game. They need to pressure Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold, executing Kevin O'Connell's opening script, very solid quarterback. I'm really impressed. Maybe what's impressed me the most is the way that KOC has been able to install blitz answers for Sam Darnold and allow him to be comfortable when the linebackers are rushing at him, replacing that blitz. But when the pressure gets home naturally, that's when we see Jets Sam Darnold. That's when we see Panthers Sam Darnold hucking it up into coverage and making mistakes in the red zone. Chicago is one of the NFL's better winning with 4 teams, and they're also really effective at limiting the quick game. Chicago might be dead in the playoff race, but this secondary isn't giving up. They're still playing hard. Obviously, we all saw the Commanders' Hail Mary play. Tyreek Stevenson making some questionable decisions, but this is still a secondary that's deep, that plays physical, that plays sticky, and it can give Sam Darnold some serious issues.
Yeah, totally, but it does come back to that pressure. You do have to make Sam Darnold nervous, and the Bears have been about league average at getting to the quarterback this season, and it feels like that's getting a little worse every week.
It's fair.
Like, I think their 3 lowest pressure percentages have come in the last 5 weeks. And definitely one of their lowest against Green Bay last week. They've got to get pressure on Sam, or else it's going to get out of hand quick. I think they will, and I think they'll be able to do. I think they'll be okay against the run. They're going to keep stuff in front of them in the pass. That's why I don't think Minnesota's going to score that much. I think it'll be, as I said, 20-17. And I think their defense will absolutely keep them in them. I think Caleb will. He's not going to play bad. I think what we saw last week of Caleb is real. I think this offense is going to come out here and play well. Just don't think it's going to be enough against a really good Vikings team.
I have a little bit of a sneaky matchup to watch, because Montez Sweat is obviously going to have to make an impact against Brian O'Neill. However, on the other hand, DeMarcus Walker, sort of a pass rush specialist who's going to get some reps on the interior and against Cam Robinson, they're going to need a good number 2 in this game. And if they can consistently get pressure, if he can consistently come through, we know that the lows of this Vikings offense can be pretty damn low, and I think it could be enough. However, I'm still going to side with Minnesota, just like you, 20-17.
Hey.
I think that's our first perfect score match of the season.
That's possible, yeah.
Next up, we've got the 9-1 Lions heading to Indy to take on the 5-6 Colts. I had to put this game 6th because of the combined records, but I think we've got a blowout on our hands. Am I wrong?
I'm not quite there with you, actually. I think Indy. I don't think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be semi-close. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. All right. I like what I saw from Anthony Richardson last week.
88% adjusted completion. He was a different guy
Yeah.
after being benched.
Like, this is a weird thing we've seen this year. 2023 quarterbacks, draft quarterbacks, are just better after they get benched for a couple games. Bryce gets benched, comes back, MVP. Will Levis gets benched, come back.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that too.
BallsTalkSports MVP. And then Richardson comes back. He's the highest completion percentage of the season, I believe. First full positive EPA game since week 1. And plus 9 EPA is a lot higher than week 1. I like what I saw from him. I like what I saw from the run game. I had a lot of doubts about if this team could seriously come back and contend for the playoffs with Richardson back, even against that rough schedule. But the team I saw last week, I think they're still a name in the AFC playoff conversation, but it's Detroit. I think juggernaut is a word that it's so hard to place that on any team. Detroit looks like a juggernaut right now.
I'm right there with you as far as having some optimism about the Colts offense. This is a team that's played a lot of teams close. I think that they're feisty. I think they're underrated in the secondary, and people overlook how good this offensive line still is. If Anthony Richardson is on, this can be a really good Indy team. However, I think this is a matchup from hell for them. Anthony Richardson has the highest average depth of target and big-time throw percentage of any quarterback in the league. The way he plays, it's just extremely linear. It's extremely predictable, and Detroit is number 1 overall in EPA per play against deep passes. They actually run a lot of quarters coverage. They keep the top on. They have the best safety duo in the league.
Oh, yeah.
Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, truly just something special. Michael Pittman needs to have a hell of a game if I'm going to take the Colts seriously.
Yeah, Aaron Glenn's not going to let that shit fly. His secondary is not letting those big plays go.
Literally, nothing is flying over top.
Yeah, no, I mean, even last week, how they won was those big chunk plays. And if the Lions have had their issues sometimes in the passing offense whenever teams have just been consistently, methodically moving the ball down the field. And unless Anthony Richardson becomes a different person overnight, that's not how the Colts are going to play. And they're not going to be able to get consistent chunks over the top. They're not going to be able to even get semi-consistent chunks over the top. Aaron Glenn is going to put this man in hell. The only worry I have is that the Lions haven't exactly been the best at generating pressure since Hutchinson went out. By the way, Hutchinson is still top 10 in pressures.
It's wild. He was so good. The fact that we're missing out on what Hutchinson could have been.
Defensive player. This was Hutchinson's breakout. This was his Defensive Player of the Year campaign, honestly. And you look at it right now, if he kept up how that was going, he's the favorite.
Defensive Player of the Decade campaign.
Well, listen, Aaron Donald played for the last 10 years. Nobody's getting that. But maybe next decade. We'll see. But yeah, so it's disappointing that he's not playing. But without him, they've definitely lacked a number 1 to just get pressure constantly. They've lacked a guy that just, when it matters most, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make the quarterback nervous. So Richardson gets a clean pocket, maybe has some room to work, maybe he gets some good runs because he was running well against the Jets last week. It's still just not going to be enough. I mean, they won by the Jets again. They beat the Jets by like a 1.
On like a 14-point comeback.
Yeah, and they looked bad for the first quarter, the first couple of quarters. This defense had a worse day than I thought that they would. Dayo Odeyingbo was nowhere to be found. He couldn't do a damn thing. Latu had a good game. I think Kwity Paye also had a few pressures. That's nice, but you're going up against Taylor Decker. You're going up against Penei Sewell. I have no confidence that this Colts front 7 is going to be able to penetrate that stout Lions pass protection and then run game. This has not been a great Colts run defense. DeForest Buckner's there. He's going to get his, but he's going up against his toughest matchup yet, Frank Ragnow. So just seems like a good matchup for Detroit offensively. Though, I mean, I don't know if there's a bad matchup for Detroit offensively, but they're also matching up well. Defensively, I've got them winning 33-21. Not necessarily a Jaguars-Titans level blowout. I think Indy keeps it within striking distance until the third or fourth quarter when the Lions put the hammer down and they win the game.
I like that you bring up the Lions front 7. I want to root for Indianapolis's offense. I think it's fun to watch when it's good, but goddamn, I think this is a matchup from hell in that phase 2. The Colts are a perimeter run team. They hit the perimeter with Jonathan Taylor. They hit the perimeter with Anthony Richardson. Detroit has been disproportionately better at taking that away. They run one of the league's more traditional 4-3 fronts, and Jack Campbell and Malcolm Rodriguez do not let that fly. Jonathan Taylor has 8 rushing first downs in his last 3 games played. It's going to be really tough for Indy to string drives together. And then on the other hand, I think you've got the exact opposite situation. Jared Goff, the most methodical passer in the NFL, I think we can say at this point, kind of reaching unprecedented territory, is going to be picking on E.J. Speed and Zaire Franklin. The Lions are top 3 in intermediate passing EPA. The Colts are bottom 3, and it checks out on film. Indy's run defense is much better with DeForest Buckner. They're actually one of the better rosters in the league at avoiding yards before contact. But when David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs break through to that second level, they're going to be turning 6-yard gains into 25-yard gains into 40-yard touchdowns. I think this could very well be another game that the Lions run away with because I don't think they get complacent after blowouts. And I think when they have an offensive advantage, they go to it over and over and over again. I have them 31-17. I think Indy will get theirs with the explosives, but I feel very safe about Detroit.
Yeah, you made a really good point there about they don't get complacent. This is not a team that's going to fall victim to a trap game, and I think that's a indictment on just how wonderful this coaching staff is. Whether it's Dan Campbell, whether it's Ben Johnson, whether it's Aaron Glenn, we've talked about it at length, how great all of these guys are. If I had a vote, Dan Campbell would be my vote for Coach of the Year. But this team doesn't get complacent. They're treating the Colts just like any other team, right? And they talked to him. Are you going to be like, are you treating the Colts the same? Which is a ridiculous question to ask an NFL head coach. But Dan Campbell's like, yeah, I mean, we're never going to take for granted an NFL team. This is our primary focus right now. We don't care who's next. And they're going to act like it. And then, the run game's obviously going to be there. But then you veer to the pass game. I mean, Kenny Moore, he's a good nickel. But
he's not going to shut down Amon-Ra.
No, I mean, what he does best is zone coverage. He's a really smart guy, knows how to bait quarterbacks with his eyes. First of all, Goff isn't going to get baited. Second of all, you do have to play man coverage at some point. The Colts do play some man. They play more zone than man, I think, than most teams. But you do have to play some man. Kenny Moore he's always been okay at man, and I think it's gotten a little worse this year. Amon-Ra is going to fry him. He's called the sun god for a reason. I just think it's so many games this season where we're talking about there is no path to victory for the team playing Detroit.
I know we've got other games to get to, but I want to shout out Dan Campbell's coaching philosophy and the fact that I can't believe it works with NFL athletes. What they do reminds me a lot of what my old cross-country coaches would tell us, which is you start hard and you pass guys at the beginning, and then you get faster throughout the race and you pass guys in the middle, and then you kick really hard and you pass guys at the end. You use the downhills and pass guys on the downhills and use your mental toughness to pass guys on the uphills. That's like what Detroit does. It's like coming off a loss. All right, we're going to get right and kick their teeth in. We're rolling. Great day to kick some teeth in. You're in your nice, friendly confines of the dome. Great conditions to kick some teeth in. You're in the snow and the rain. That works to our advantage. We're going to kick some teeth in, or bite some kneecaps. It's just so visible on the football field. Man, it feels like something out of a comic book.
Yeah, I mean, this is a movie team. I mean, no one plays harder for their head coach than the Detroit Lions do.
This is the best version of Motor City. Next in line, we have a surprisingly fun AFC East matchup between the 3-8 Patriots and the 4-6 Dolphins. Can the Pats play spoiler and bury Miami's season for good?
You know what? I think they can. I think this is going to be a close game. And I'm not going to say that they can. I'm going to say that they will. I've got the Patriots winning this one. The Drake May magic is real. Last week, he played very well. I mean, he was the single reason that the Patriots were in it. He wasn't getting much help from his receivers. When he did, that was nice, and he took advantage of it. But he was throwing guys open, and he was making plays with his legs. He was making plays with his eyes. It's starting to come together in a very bad situation. You know what I mean? I'm liking what I've seen from Drake May, and I also think this is a really good matchup for New England. As good of a matchup as you can have for the Patriots. You know, Miami's strength is their run defense. And what is New England really bad at? The run game. So in a weird way, it kind of works. I mean, New England is consistent in the way that they're always going to be the 30th best run game in the league. They're never going to be the 32nd best run game in the league. They're never going to do that. So they're going to come out there. They're going to be the 30th best run game in the league. Miami is going to play the run because that's what they do. and then they're just going to let New England pass.
They're like the Steelers of being bad.
Exactly. Like, they're always going to be bad, and no matter what, Miami, what they've done is they've played decent running teams, and they try to eliminate the run, and that makes those teams out of sorts. We don't know how to act when we don't have this run game that's at least okay. New England knows how to act. That's their constant state of being when they have a non-existent run game. That's where Drake May excels. Not excels, but I mean, that's all he's been asked to do, and he's excelling. So I think when you look at the matchups for the Patriots receivers, they're favorable. Get Demario Douglas in the slot for the Patriots. Yeah, Kader Coho, who he's
been rough.
not been good. He has not been good. Demario Douglas has been the best Patriots receiver, and he's been getting better as the season's going on. He's also getting more routes, which is really good. If he can go out here, get him the ball 5 or 6 times, he can go for 100 and a touchdown. But then you also got my matchup to watch, Hunter Henry versus Jordan Brooks. What the hell happened with Jordan Brooks last week? He's had a good season in pass coverage. Brock Bowers annihilated him. It was consistent. Jordan Brooks, well, let's throw Jordan Brooks on Brock Bowers in man coverage. That's how we're going to stop it. No, Brock Bowers destroyed him. And I think Hunter Henry's going to do a similar thing in man coverage. Brock Bowers, there was, surprisingly, I went back and watched some of his targets last week. There was, a lot of finesse to his game. He was not making Brooks necessarily miss with his athleticism like you would expect. He was making him miss with the nuances to his game. And I feel like an underrated tight end is Hunter Henry just because he knows the game. He knows how to play tight end in and out better than almost anybody in the league. He's got great hands, and he's going at the route stem. He's going to make Jordan Brooks very confused. And there's going to be a couple times during this game where Hunter Henry's going to be in his own zip code. And you're going to be, how did this happen? Jordan Brooks got faked out. So I think Drake May is going to have a lot more guys to throw to than normal. Miami's strength will not necessarily be there as it usually is. I think New England takes advantage of it. Their defense does just enough. They steal an upset, and they crush Miami's playoffs hopes for good.
I'm here for it. I think that the Patriots are hungry to play spoiler after a couple of tough losses. They like to play teams close. Drake May, he's been overperforming, but he is a wild card. Over the weeks that he's been starting for the Pats, he's behind only Joe Flacco in turnover-worthy play percentage. And he makes big throws. We know he's got the arm talent, but the way he's been doing it off-platform, rolling out to the intermediate part of the field, it's interesting to me because he is tied for 27th in that same span in deep ball adjusted completion percentage. So factoring in drops and such, there are going to be opportunities to take advantage of the Dolphins downfield. That's going to be there. The question is, can Drake May hit it? There's a chance he can. There's a chance he can't. On the other hand, for this Dolphins offense, they've had significantly more good performances than bad with Tua back in the lineup. We knew the offense was going to look different, and I think that we've got the version of the Dolphins that we were expecting. I think that backfield targets to Devon Achane are going to do a lot of damage, and I think there's a chance that this works out very favorably for the Dolphins in terms of the way they play fast, finesse-y football. There's a world where the Patriots go out and out-physical them, but I think there might be a chance that the Dolphins are just too fast. I'm looking at Jonnu Smith to have a big day against a slower, heavier linebacker unit, Caden Ellison, Jelani Tavai. We could see Miami put up big numbers.
Yeah, that's a real concern, but I'm kind of concerned with how the run game played last week, At 26 carries, 82 yards, and averaging 3.2 a carry, and 30 of those yards were on run.
It was an ugly 3.2 yards per carry.
Yeah, that was not good, and it's against the Raiders' run defense. That was not the fact that they got outplayed. That was the fact that was a fundamental failure of the scheme to scheme up run games, and we thought that wouldn't happen when Tua came back and the wheels were turning in the pass game, but they did not turn in the run game. And New England, they're getting a little better at stopping the run defense. They're getting a lot, they're getting better on the back end. Is Duggar back for this one? I don't know that or not.
I think he's still listed as questionable. My guess would be that this is another game where he doesn't play, but I could be wrong about that.
I guess. I mean, that injury wasn't great. Yeah, he's still listed as questionable. He's practicing in a limited way, so maybe he comes back. That would be a big help for New England. But if you can't establish a run game against New England, I don't know if I can necessarily trust Tua to put it on his back again against an admittedly rough Patriots secondary, but a secondary that's getting better. We still haven't seen Jalen Waddle play up to par with what we think that he should be playing. And then you look at the defense. Miami's defense, again, not only did they not run the ball well, they didn't stop the run well last week against the Raiders. Do you know how bad it is for the Raiders run? Do you know how bad you have to be for the Raiders run defense to look even halfway good against you? And then they also didn't stop the pass very well. They let the Raiders score 19 points, and honestly, it should have been
19 too
more.
many.
Yeah, it's 19 too many, and it should have been more. I've got serious concerns with Miami. I think there's kind of a mirage going on here. I don't think they're a serious playoff contender, and I think New England goes out there. They get a statement win. I think Tariq May has a good game. And, when you look at those turnover-worthy plays, he's definitely made some mistakes. He's definitely throwing the ball where he shouldn't be. I think it is slightly misleading because three interceptions have come on the last Patriots play from scrimmage, which is not the best stat, but all of them were on 4th down. 4th and long, Drake May, he's just got to chuck it, or it's 3rd and long. We need it, and it's like, if you throw a pick, whatever, because the alternative is they just get the ball. So some of that's being inflated by the fact that they're asking him to just make a play when it matters most, and if they don't make the play, it doesn't matter because the game's over. So Drake May has thrown a couple of passes there that have gotten picked that, you know what? I'm happy he threw that ball. It got picked. Yeah, last week, the game ended because Demario Douglas didn't look up. The ball sailed right over his head and into the arms of a defender, and that counted as a turnover-worthy play, I believe, because I was curious about that, and it did count because it was a little off. But Demario Douglas, if he gets his head up, he can catch that ball. Patriots could drive down the field, score a touchdown, win that game. So there's a little bit of a mirage around that. Not saying that he hasn't had his fair share of turnover-worthy plays. I don't think it's necessarily as bad as that stat makes it out to be.
Those 4th down arm punts aren't supposed to be classified as turnover-worthy. However, I think when you look at those numbers, I don't mind the way he's playing the game right now. Miami is vulnerable with Kendall Fuller out, trotting out some really below-average corners. If he's going to take shots and some of them are going to get picked, I'm all right with that. And then to swing back to the Patriots' defensive end and how they're playing better in the trenches, like you mentioned, I've got eyes on Anthony Jennings. He's not an alpha edge rusher or anything like that, but he's been modestly effective generating pressure, which, on this Patriots line, you'll take that. And he has been a very good edge setter. What does Miami want to do? They want to run to the perimeter, and it was abysmal against the Raiders last week. If Miami comes out and they look disjointed at the start, and the Patriots fill that void and they get the run game going with Ramondre Stevenson, who's not a bad back, there is a game script where they take control of this one, and they get Tua and this Miami offense in a situation that they're not comfortable with, and they steal it. I do have the Dolphins winning 30-17 just based on the roster talent disparity,
Fair.
but there is very much a lane for the Pats to pull off this upset.
Yeah, I've got the Patriots 23-20, but if Miami runs away with this one, I'm not surprised either. I see that world, and I'm like, I think that's the most likely. There's a bunch of scenarios. Most of them are the Dolphins win, but that specific scenario, New England wins by 3 in a tough game, I think that's the most likely out of the, hundreds of scenarios to happen, and that's why I picked it.
That is the plurality of scenarios.
Exactly.
Now, we've got a battle between two teams whose seasons couldn't have been more different. In one corner, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, blown out by multiple scores in each of their last one game. At home, on the other end of the ring, the Carolina Panthers, who haven't lost since Halloween. Victor, as the world's biggest Bryce Young apologist, give me your take.
Okay, I'll be frank. I'm very happy that the Chiefs lost last week.
Oh, me too.
Man,
Fuck 'em.
We talked it into existence, and it happened. I'm surprised at how they lost last week, though, because when the Chiefs lose games, first of all, it's almost never by more than one possession. Second of all, they almost never look outclassed, but that's how they looked last week. Buffalo looked like the better team in almost every facet of the game, and I think this game, Buffalo-Kansas City, 2024, this is the first game since 2017 that the best quarterback on the field was objectively and 100% not Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes has had bad games against good quarterbacks, but you can still give him his props. This was one where Mahomes was playing at the top of his game, I felt like, not necessarily the top of his game, but he did what he could, and he still wasn't the best guy out there. It was Josh Allen, and I think that really worries me for not only the Chiefs' future, but this game.
I don't think the Chiefs were outclassed in that one. You got to remember that the Bills made a bold play call to go for it on a 4th and short to medium where Josh Allen went through his reads, kept the play alive, and then scrambled and delivered about 3 stiff arms and trucks to Chiefs defenders on his way to the end zone to then make it a 2-score game in a situation where kicking the field goal would have given Mahomes the ball back with an opportunity to drive. I think we're seeing what the Chiefs really are. In full seriousness, I think this is somewhere around a 7-3 caliber football team. I think they're very good. I think they win this game soundly. I think they establish the run game. Isaiah Pacheco, is he ruled out or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. It wasn't look like he was going to play. It wasn't looking like he was going to play. Kareem Hunt is not an explosive back. He might be the least explosive back in the NFL to be receiving meaningful carries, but the reason they went out and signed him, the reason that they like him is because he gets what's there. And this Panthers defensive line, still among the worst in the NFL. They're getting some guys back. They're not in a tier of their own as the worst defensive line in the NFL. However, I still think the Chiefs are going to be able to kick some ass behind the really strong interior offensive line. It's not just Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. Joe Thuney has been excellent as well. The interior run game is going to be exceptional. The Chiefs are going to sustain drives. This is the number 1 third down offense in the league versus the number 32 third down defense in the league. And when you're going against a quarterback like Bryce Young, what you want to do is keep him off the field. Do you think that Carolina can just outpace Kansas City?
I think they absolutely can outpace Kansas City because Kansas City does not want to pace fast.
They're not explosive. That's very true.
But yeah, Bryce, I think that's I do have Kansas City win this game. I'll actually say, listen, if Kansas City had won that last game, they had eked it out by like a little. There's a part of me that I think there's a chance I would have picked Carolina this week because Kansas City was getting more and more complacent every single week, and they were getting more and more vulnerable to a loss, and it just felt like it was coming. And if it didn't come against Buffalo, I was like, maybe it could happen against Carolina. But no, they're not going to lose this game. I've got them, but I've only got them by 8. I've got them 20-12, and I'll tell you why. Well, 20-13 actually, so 7. I'll tell you why. I think Bryce Young's going to have a difficult day. I don't think he's going to have a bad day. Because again, I like how he's playing against pressure, but they're going to bring pressure. All right, Spags is going to bring the nickels and blitzes. Chris Jones is going to give him hell. All right, so Bryce is not going to have an easy time, and his receivers aren't going to get open consistently. But we've got Ike Ekwonu back this week. That's a big plus. You know what? I don't feel like there's like a number 1 edge on this Kansas City team. Karlaftis has played well, but I don't think he's a number 1. So I don't know if there's going to be a guy to consistently hurt him from the outside, where I feel like he's been most weak to pressure from the outside, where he doesn't see it coming. This defense is getting healthy again. I think an underrated part of this defense is Josie Jewell. He came back against the Broncos, I believe, and ever since then, not only has the run defense looked better, but this linebacker group, not only Josie Jewell, but as a whole has looked better in covering tight ends, and I think that'll be big to kind of do something against Travis Kelce, because another thing is Josie Jewell has a lot of history with Travis Kelce. He was a Denver Bronco for 6 years or so, and he played Kelce a lot. And you know what? He wasn't awful against him. And this is a guy who knows how to tackle well. He's not going to let Kelce get all those yards after the catch that Kelce loves to do. That's one thing he's notably been great against. And then you've got J.C. Horn. He's getting better every week, it seems like. He's doing real well. Got a couple more guys back. It's just a positive energy in Carolina. The run game is working, and I don't think that's necessarily going to stop today or on Sunday against Kansas City. I think Kansas City's going to win. I think it'll be rather definitive. But moral victories are underrated, and I think that's what this week will be for Carolina.
You talked about how you don't think Bryce Young is going to have a terrible day, and I agree, because I don't think Bryce Young is a good starter right now. If you throw out that Denver tape, which I'll get to in a moment, so against the Saints and the Giants, he's bottom half in big-time throw rate, bottom half in adjusted completion percentage, bottom half in passer rating. But what he does well, pressure to sack ratio, sidestepping the blitz, keeping his poise under pressure, and turnover-worthy play rate. When he doesn't see an immediate option, he's not putting it up for grabs. He's not airmailing throws. He just looks much cleaner, much more composed. In that game against Denver, you watched that. He didn't look good, but he didn't look like 2023 first 2 games of 2024 Bryce Young. He looked okay. He looked like a lot of quarterbacks have looked against Denver.
And he had his moments, which is not something you can say about most Bryce Young games.
I think that that's the blueprint for what they want to do against Kansas City. I don't think they're going to win. I think that Kansas City is definitively better than them in just about every way. But I think if you come out of here and you put up 2 touchdowns, you don't let the Chiefs blow the doors off and make some grand statement. Bryce Young is feeling good. He's picking up the chains with his legs and making the first down sign, and he's smiling. That is a moral victory, and moral victories are underrated. I've got Casey taking this one 27-14.
Moment of silence.
What was that?
Moment of silence.
There you go. All right, that's sufficient silence. Daniel Jones, the $160 million man, has been kicked to the curb. Like, if you haven't heard yet, he literally just got cut. From the ashes rises a majestic phoenix who definitely isn't just slightly younger Daniel Jones. Said phoenix is set to take on the 4-6 Buccaneers. Does Tommy Cutlets get it done and put the Bucs' playoff aspirations to bed?
He's a back. And you know it, Tommy DeVito is back. But he's back, and that's not a good thing. He was not good. I mean, listen, it was fun. It was fun having a member of the Italian Mafia playing quarterback for the New York Giants. Always fun. I think that represented the Giants well. I think he'll bring a good atmosphere for Giants fans. He's not a good player. He's not. There's just... I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball. They couldn't move the ball with Daniel Jones. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball with Tommy Cutlets. Run game will be okay against admittedly beat up Buccaneers defense. I just don't see any way that he's going to come out here and give a positive passing performance unless we see, the quarterback change anomaly where quarterbacks just play better. I don't think we're going to see that. And I think this team is hurt, yeah, but I think they're going to be this Buccaneers team is hurt. I think they're going to be rejuvenated. They've got their one of their team leaders, Mike Evans, back this week. It's been a long time, but we've got him back, and I think that'll be enough to give them this win.
I don't think we see that interim quarterback, if you will, bump either, because Tommy DeVito plays markedly similar to Daniel Jones. They're both kind of timid, weak-armed, slightly mobile guys who avoid the big turnover-worthy decisions. DeVito had, I think, the lowest average depth of target in the league during that little starting span he had. It's just going to look the same, and that doesn't get me excited. Now, if there is a route for them to put up some points, which has been a really tall task, they've only scored more than 23 once. That was that game against Seattle where I believe they had a blocked kick return touchdown. This has been a lethargic New York offense. I do think it starts with Malik Neighbors, who needs to work a weakened Buccaneers secondary. They might be missing Tyke Smith and Zion McCollum. KJ Britt has been an issue in coverage. Malik Neighbors needs to get 15 targets, and he needs to break some tackles and take at least one to the house. I still have a lot of faith in the Bucs to get this done and keep their season alive.
Yeah, totally, and I don't think it's as much of a factor as the Buccaneers defense is going to be able to stop the Giants offense. I just think that I don't see an answer for the Giants defense to the Buccaneers offense. Tampa Bay has built a rather consistent, a slightly above average run game that they did not have earlier in the season, and I don't think that's going to change against the 31st ranked New York Giants in EPA per rush allowed defense. Dexter Lawrence can only do so much. These running backs, Rashad White, Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker, have all been very good. And then Baker Mayfield, he's got Mike Evans back. He's been cooking without him, but I think he's just going to have to do a little less. He's going to have to throw guys open just a little less. He's going to get a few more easy completions. There will be a few more times where they move the down because a receiver didn't drop it. There'll be a few more times when Baker can throw to Mike and feel a little bit more confident that he's going to bring down a 50-50 ball, because that's just been pretty much non-existent in the Buccaneers offense. And then you've also got Cade Otton functioning as what looks to be a top 8 tight end in football, so that's nice. I just don't see a way the Giants are going to be able to stop this Buccaneers team, and maybe they get 14 on offense, 16 points. It's just not going to be enough.
Bobby Okereke has been having a strong season in coverage. Drew Phillips, standout rookie.
Yeah.
New York is actually pretty competitive with the quick passes, which is how Tampa Bay wants to win. But then again, you've got pissed off Baker and pissed off Mike Evans looking to keep that 1,000-yard season streak alive. He needs to average about 100 a game. You never know. So they're going to be the better version of what we've seen from the Tampa Bay offense, which already isn't too bad. You talked about how bad the Giants have been taking away the run game. They are abysmal against perimeter carries. It truly, Dexter Lawrence is the only thing they have that can effectively stop the run. And guess what? Bucky Irving is best at attacking. He's best at running outside the tackles. That's even primarily how they use Rashad White when they give him carries. This could be a really nice get-right sort of game for the Buccaneers. Get back on track, build the framework of an offense that can go on a run and can keep you in contention with the Falcons to take this division.
Yeah. And you said there's been some sneaky good guys in coverage this season. I also think Tyler Nubin has had his moments. He's had his bad moments, but he's had his good moments too. But you know what? When it comes down to it, who's going to be guarding Mike Evans? It's going to be Deonte Banks. And I don't think Deonte Banks has necessarily been bad. He hasn't been great. I just think he's been getting beat in unfortunate ways. I mean, look at this guy. It feels like every time a ball could go either way, the receiver brings it down, and it's not necessarily his fault. But, man, if there's anybody who's good at bringing down balls that could go either way, it's Mike Evans. So in physical situations, I think Mike Evans is going to have his way with Deonte Banks. And I think we could see the first of hopefully many 100-yard games to keep that streak alive. But, yeah, that's a severe concern I have. Because then if you don't throw Deonte Banks on him, you're not going to put Cordell Flott on him. So it's just a rough matchup for the Giants.
I've got this one, Tampa Bay 24-18, and if you add those two numbers, you get the amount of times that Mike Evans can bench press Deonte Banks' weight.
I've got him 24-9.
We've officially reached that part of the show. We've got the 2-8 Titans against the 7-4 Texans, and oh my God, is Will Levis actually back?
Yes, what? We've been talking about this. He is back. He's never been more. In fact, he never left. Will Levis, BallsTalkSports MVP, he's the BallsTalkSports franchise quarterback.
He's just been legitimately very solid. And against the Chargers and the Vikings, two really good secondaries, no less. 5 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. We know what Levis can be if he cuts out the boneheaded interceptions. He's got the physical tools. He, at times, has the coverage recognition. This is franchise quarterback material. Now, am I skeptical that he's going to keep it up? Obviously. I think you have to be. We need to keep seeing it. But this is a pretty solid Texans defense, and if he goes out there and keeps them competitive, I'm not even going to go as far as puts them in a position to win because his offensive line is actively betraying him. They're dead last in pressure percentage allowed. The Texans defense is getting healthier. It looks like Stingley's going to be okay. Lassiter's coming back. Petrie's back healthy. Will Anderson might play in this one. That is a tough defense to go up against, especially with an abysmal offensive line. But if he looks solid, consider my attention grabbed.
Yeah, listen, and you know what? I'm not joking. I do think Levis has shown signs of being back against 2 really good defenses, too. It's an underrated part of it. Young looked really good against 2 bad defenses, and we were crowning him. So let's talk about Will Levis, why don't we? But, yeah, this is just not the matchup for the this is not the statement on back game from Levis because it's just a tough matchup. Will Anderson, I think, will probably play in this one. I think maybe they set him for another week because you know you're probably going to get this win, but I think he might play. And then even if you don't, Danielle Hunter is going to wreck this game. They're going to bring blitzes, and this Titans offensive line is not going to be able to stop one of the best pressure-getting, not only defenses, but schemes in football right now. So it's tough. And then the other side of it, Texans offense looked real good last week. I think it was the Cowboys, right? So can't really take that at face value, but Nico Collins back and looked back to form. The game script didn't feature him much, didn't feature much passing, so we didn't get to see a big offensive game, but there was a couple of plays where he went out there and, man, nobody on the Texans could have done that in the past few weeks, and he made a couple of plays that would have not been made otherwise. And they were also a good sign that his athleticism really hasn't taken a hit and they still trust those feet, those ankles, is that they called like 3 screen passes for him. They were like, we want to get you the ball in open space and let you do your thing. So I think that's a really good sign for Collins. Stroud looked great. The run game was dominant. I mean, shows what this run game can really be when things are functioning well. We'll see if that continues against the quality Titans run defense we talked about a little bit earlier. But then again, you know what? You can pass the ball a little bit more because, well, the Titans secondary isn't all that good in the first place. And then you can probably get your most reliable guy in man coverage, Roger McCreary. He's going to miss Sunday's game. So not looking good, like a good matchup for the Titans defense. Levis, I hope you'll be able to do some stuff, put him on notice. But no, I've got Houston 27, Tennessee 17.
I don't think we see the same type of ass kicking that we watched last week against the Cowboys from the Texans' offensive perspective, because I don't think they're going to have that dominant run game. Tennessee's defensive line is actually pretty solid at stopping the run. I'm watching Tavondre Sweat against a weaker Houston interior offensive line. However, Stroud just needs a little bit of pass protection, and he's going to be just fine. They're going to get their explosives from Nico Collins and Tank Dell against a Tennessee secondary that's down L'Jarius Sneed and Roger McCreary. My swing factor, what I think the Titans need to keep him in this game, is a great game from Jeffrey Simmons. He needs to be creating instant pressure up the middle, again, against a poor, aforementioned Texans interior offensive line group. There is a route for them to win this game because we've seen what the worst of this Texans offense can be, albeit that was without Nico Collins. He's obviously a numbers changer. I think the Texans win this one soundly. I've got them 24-14. Our second to last ball game is a divisional rivalry, which means anything can happen, right? Well, you be the judge. We've got the 3-7 Cowboys headed to their inevitable demise against the 7-4 Commanders, who are favored by 10.5. I think the Commanders get very, very right and end their 2-game losing streak. Count on Jaden Daniels to rebound. I don't think anyone in the Dallas secondary can hang with Terry McLaurin, but there's a chance they don't even really lean into Jaden. They don't risk him taking hits against Micah Parsons. Washington wants a reliable run game, and they are going to get one. Both Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler are going to be excellent. This is a Dallas team that essentially bases with 3 linebackers on the field, and they are still absolutely pitiful against the run. This is going to be brutal.
Yeah, this is a classic get-right game for the Commanders. I think this run, they're going to lean on the run game all day against a bottom-ranked Cowboys run defense. It's just going to be a really easy game for the Commanders, and it's one they need to get their minds right. And even if you do lean on Jaden Daniels a little bit more, then you know what? It's like you said, nobody's going to be able to stop Terry McLaurin. Trayvon Diggs is good. We've got Deron Bland back in this one. This is going to be his first appearance of the season. Very good to have that back. We'll see if that changes things up a little bit. But ultimately, both him and Diggs share a common problem, which is where they'll have their really good moments, but they're not elite because they're going to have their bad moments. What makes an elite corner, in my opinion, a truly elite number one guy, is a guy that you know is never going to burn you. You can throw him out there against the number one receiver every rep, and even if he loses, he's going to make it competitive. This is your Patrick Surtains of the world. This is your Jalen Johnsons of the world, right? These are the guys you just don't have to worry about, and you have to worry about Diggs and Bland giving up big plays a lot because they love to do that. They can get a couple of picks, but when you look at Jaden Daniels, who's done such a good job of holding on to the football and not turning it over and not making those stupid plays that I feel like Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland do a very good job of taking advantage of, this is not a good matchup for those elite Cowboys corners. So Washington's going to be able to get whatever they want on the offensive side. And then the Cowboys have Cooper Rush starting at quarterback, and I think that pretty much sums up what their offense is going to look like.
My swing factor in this game is just whether or not Deron Bland can walk away with 5 or 6 pick sixes.
We'll see.
Will
it be enough?
That's more likely to be their source of producing points than the Cooper Rush-led offense is. It's just as kind of a final word on the Commanders' offense versus whatever 11 guys the Cowboys are running out their narrative. Dallas has given up 27-plus each of the last 5 weeks. We know what Washington does to bad defenses. This is another one of the teams that just doesn't let the foot off the gas. They are out there to make statements, and I think they get one. Dallas isn't going to establish a run game. I've given up on that a long time ago. That's one of the Commanders' weaknesses is interior run defense. It's not going to matter. They're the pass-happiest team in the league with goddamn Cooper Rush as the starting quarterback. Now, if there's a guy who could at least produce well, it's CeeDee Lamb. The Commanders don't have Marshawn Lattimore. They still have the worst cornerback room in the NFL. He might score 2 touchdowns one way or another. It's possible.
Yeah.
Even if it's just catching a slant and then breaking a tackle or two, we could see that. But this is still a completely lethargic Dallas offense with no defense to back them up.
Well, that's the thing. I think that'll be the Cowboys' entire offense. Throw a slant to CeeDee Lamb and just see if he can make a couple guys miss. Because this is my matchup to watch if there's anything to watch about this game. Like, if you want something to look at, it's CeeDee Lamb versus Noah Benogany. And this just truly tells you how bad this Cowboys team is because this matchup doesn't even matter. I have this written down. CeeDee Lamb versus Noah Benogany. This is one of the best football receivers in football versus one of the worst corners in football. And I'm still going to say Dallas is going to lose by 20. I've got CeeDee Lamb versus Noah Benogany. Lamb's going to kill him. Is it going to matter? I don't think it will because Rush is going to have to hit him. You can make things really simple. But then again, you can just throw 3 guys on CeeDee Lamb, right? And then who else is going to make plays? Ryan Flournoy? Throw this year in the trash for Dallas. Is this their second or their first game against Washington?
I think it's their first.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're not swept yet, but you probably will end up being swept. So, the Commies should run away with this one pretty quick, and I don't think it'll be close by any measure.
My matchup to watch is CeeDee Lamb versus the irresistible urge to limp to the sidelines and say that you're done for the day. I've got Commanders 34-13.
Just say you're done for the season, CD. Just it's over, man. Just let's go at it again next year.
Play video games with Dak.
Exactly.
And rounding out the pod, we have a BallsTalkSports favorite, the Denver Broncos, taking on the scum of the earth, the 2-8 Raiders. Victor, how much does Denver win by?
Well, first, I've got a song for everyone. I thought love was only true in fairy tales, meant for someone else but not for me. Love was out to get me. That's the way it seemed. Disappointed haunted all my dreams. And then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer! Bo Nix is here, ladies and gentlemen. Not only is he AFC Rookie of the Week, but he is the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. The Broncos listen, we saw Broncos Raiders earlier in the season, a much lesser version of the Broncos offense, and about the same defense, but a much lesser version of the Broncos offense. They scored 34 points. This was not the same Bo Nix we've seen. Bo had his best game of his career, obviously best game of the season last week against Atlanta. Whatever he tried worked. And Atlanta's defense isn't great, but it's not bad either. Bo Nix was annihilating these guys. He looked like a seasoned vet. I mean, I liked Nix coming into the draft. I liked the Broncos pick. I was concerned about his ceiling. I don't know, man. We see this a few times where guys' arms will just get better when they get in the league. I think Nix's arm was underrated coming out of Oregon. I think it's gotten better. He's slinging it in there. You know, this offense looks really good. They established a decent run game against an admittedly banged up run defense but I believe they still had Grady Jarrett. So they were able to establish a run game against an okay run defense. They were able to dominate through the air against an okay pass defense. Their pass catchers caught the football and made plays after the catch. The offensive line was impenetrable. And yeah, maybe it isn't the best defense, but the Raiders aren't a very good defense either. This is going to be a dominant game from Denver. It's the red hot, looking like unstoppable Broncos offense versus the pathetic excuse for an NFL team that is the Las Vegas Raiders right now. The only thing the Raiders have to their... Also, by the way, if you were any more convinced about Bo Nix, maybe he has a tough game. The Raiders' top 3 cornerbacks all have not practiced. To insult to injury...
Isn't that injury to insult?
Injury to insult, injury to insult, injury to insult, because there's nothing going right for the Raiders. But yeah, that makes it worse. The one thing the Raiders can hang their hat on, hey, we have Brock Bowers. And, you know, Brock Bowers had a good game, was responsible for, like, all of the Raiders' meaningful points against the Broncos last time they played. But last time they played, the Broncos did not have Cody Barton, and Cody Barton has been exceptional this year, especially in coverage. He has been a true game changer, and he's back, and he's looking better than ever. So Barton could take away the one joy that the Raiders have this season. You know what? And I wish the worst for Raiders fans. I truly do. Broncos take the season sweep 30-10 for the first time since, I believe, 2016. Fuck the Raiders. Broncos win. Bottom text. Let's go. What do you got?
My notes on the Raiders are actually it just says Brock Bowers in Sharpie,
That's it.
circled by a highlighter with a string of obscenities after. But in all seriousness, Bo Nix is sharp. Divine Diablo and Robert Spillane, who have been iffy in coverage, are in for bad days. I think a guy probably going to have a good day is Devon Vele, who's really
Yes.
impressed me. He's looking better and better. In theory, and I say in theory because I don't see a path to victory, the Raiders need turnovers. Bo Nix has been elite, and I don't use that word lightly. Elite is like top 1 to 2. It is top tier. He has been elite at keeping the ball away from defenses since those first two welcome to the NFL type of games. And then you go to the Raiders offense. I don't know how this team scores any points. They've scored 20 or fewer in their last 7. I don't know how they're getting there because they have an abysmal run game. They have a bad offensive line, and this is an absolutely atrocious offense under pressure. Victor, what do the Broncos specialize in besides being really good at defense? Like what particularly do they do well?
Well, they cover in man very well, and they blitz a lot with high pressure rates.
Broncos 31-9.
I love it. Love the pick. Yeah, this is the Raiders. This is probably the Raiders' biggest remaining game of the season, right? Because, I mean, you can't get swept by the Broncos, right? After all of the trash talk that you guys have done over the past 5 years, we're undefeated against you in the last 8 games. Shut the fuck up. It's over. The season sweep's happening. You know what? And one more thing about the Broncos offense is that people have been kind of confused. Why does this offense look so different this year? Why does Sean Payton's offense look so different this year than last year? And it's because it's working how it's meant to. A big part of Sean Payton's how he wants to run the game is methodical. We run the ball, we pass, we just get chunks and chunks and chunks. And you know what's the biggest sin you can commit in a Sean Payton offense? Getting sacked a lot. And that's exactly what Russell Wilson was terrible at. And you know what Bo Nix is really good at? He doesn't take stupid sacks. Maybe once or twice he'll make a bad sack and that'll kill the drive. But overall, he is consistent. He can always find the short guy. He will generally get rid of the ball. And if he does have to take a sack, it's going to be a shorter sack. That's why Russell Wilson was so bad in the Sean Payton offense. Because, first of all, he wasn't good for the Denver Broncos, but he took too many sacks, and that's why it's working so well this year. Bo Nix is the perfect fit in so many ways for what Sean Payton's running. That's why Denver's doing so well this season. That's why I think they advance to 7-5. That's why I think they're a serious playoff contender.
Last word for you, got a little player prop. I'm calling an Audric Estime rushing touchdown. We both picked the Broncos. Naturally, Raiders are going to win.
Please don't.
And that's all we've got for you. You can thank Father Goodell for only giving us 12 games to blabber on about this week. And with that, class dismissed. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you after our Thanksgiving break. But don't forget to stay hard.